Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Black Tea News. Happy New Year. I hope you guys had a safe weekend, that you enjoyed your New Year's Eve going into your New Year's Day. I had a really good New Year's Eve. As you guys know, I said I was going to church, and we had a really good church service that night. New Year's Day, we had a get together at my sister's house before, we had some relatives that left town. And I do this thing where I make murder mystery games. I haven't made one in a while, but I did it. She asked me to. So I try to, the sister doesn't ask for too many things. So when she asked, I try to accommodate. So I went ahead and made the murder mystery game, and we had a good time. And then, church on Sunday. And now we're back here for the first Black Tea of the new year. So I wanted to make sure that we were talking about something important. Not that we don't talk about important things every day, but I mentioned on Friday that I wanted to touch on. I covered this in an article that I had dropped last week, but I want to go into more detail about what I think is truly the greatest sort of threat going on right now in America and the U.S. And how we can push back against it, and why I do what I do here at Black Tea News. So it's an important topic. I think it's an important episode. So if you're watching, go ahead and please feel free to share this and start adding people. Say, hey, I think you should watch it today. Or and those of you who are watching not live but watching on the playback, feel free to share. Feel free to share anytime, because I do feel that we have a big war in front of us, and if we don't at least wake up to the prevailing threat coming our way, we're going to be in a very, very bad spot. So before we jump into all that, I do wish you all Happy New Year. Thank you all who were wishing me one. As we begin in the comments, I'm looking. And please go to blacktnews.com to check out different articles that I have, like the one I just referenced. Check out different content that I have on the website. I have other videos you guys can check out. I have different merchandise that you guys can check out at the store, like the goat hoodie. And I got some new stuff that's going to be dropping tonight as well. So keep an eye out for those things. And please check out different books that I've written as well. I do want to thank the Brighter Michigan PAC. I'm in their studio today. I thank them for being part of the solution and elevating conservative voices. If I say something today that you guys don't like, they don't care. I don't care. It doesn't work like that. I'm just using the space, but they are a good group who wants to make sure that we spread conservative messages. And so here I am in their studio, and I appreciate having the opportunity to use this space so I can do Black Tea. I'll do wherever I can, but I'm glad to have this particular space in the studio. So before we jump into the meat of the day, I do want to encourage you all to also consider leaving a donation. If you like what we do here at blacktnews.com, you can go to blacktnews.com/donate and just offer your support in that sort of way. I thank everyone who shares, everyone who watches, everyone who subscribes. If you like to watch on Facebook, make sure that you guys are still subscribing on YouTube and other places, because that does ultimately help the channel grow. Obviously helps us grow, but there's also other measures that you get the bigger your stuff gets. So even if you have a preference to where you watch Black Tea, please make sure that you're following across different platforms as well, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. All my handles on those platforms are at Black Tea News, and the only one that's different is Twitter, and that one is at True Black Tea. I will be getting other accounts different platforms, I know, on Getter and other things like that, especially as the censorship police is coming. I heard Marjorie Taylor Greene got offed on Twitter the other day. The doctor who created the mRNA, he got Malone, he got kicked off on Twitter, and then he went on Joe Rogan, which that was pre-planned for him going on Joe Rogan, so it did not coincide with each other. It was just a coincidence. And I think that episode of Joe Rogan is his most listened to podcast. I got about an hour through it, and then I watched Cobra Kai, so I didn't finish it. But it was pretty fascinating, and I would say you guys should check that out. It was pretty interesting. Interesting podcast, whether you take him all at his word or not. He really goes into the deep dive of a lot of people. He's not trying to read their thoughts and assess why they are doing what they're doing, but he does mention like coordinated efforts from people to try to push along. It seems like push along the hysteria and using the COVID for politics, which we already know that, but the depth of what he was talking about was crazy. He said he got kicked off the LinkedIn, and he got a letter, I think, from the founders or people running LinkedIn. They're like, well, we don't have anyone talented enough or knowledgeable enough to fact check you, so we're just gonna have to let you go. And I'm like, that is so funny. They're like, you are too smart for us, sir, so we just gotta ditch you. That's pretty crazy to me. And that's pretty amazing that they admitted that. But I didn't know that was something that the fact checkers were just gonna, social media sites were just gonna start doing now. Not that you're just so full of misinformation. It's we can't even tell because you're just too up there and we're not credentialed enough to say it, so we're just gonna get rid of you. I mean, it's just pretty incredible. Which, by the way, some of you who follow me on Facebook know that I posted a quote from him on Facebook, and that got fact checked really fast. I think there was over 400 likes or something, or interactions or whatever, as far as like likes and hearts and whatever on Facebook. So, and then a lot of people shared it. So I know a lot of people saw that post, but I think the fact that they censored it is what made it more popular, because people were talking about in the comments the fact check from Facebook that should have not even really applied, and it was fact check for missing context, not because it wasn't true. So it was just really weird. They've posted not misinformation, but missing context stuff on my page before, and it's never been justified, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It's never been justified from what I can tell. But hey, Facebook, they argued in court that their fact checkers are just really opinions. So what can you do? What can you do? So anyway, before I jump into the meat of the story today, I do have something funny that I forgot that I wanted to mention last week. Joe Biden, when he was, I guess, out on the beach, he had an interesting someone tweeted something pretty interesting. First of all, they're on the beach walking with these masks on with their dog. Guys, you just don't need to do this. You're just walking with, I assume that's Jill, and they're just on the beach walking the dog and they're wearing the mask. But someone zoomed in on the little loop there and just said, oh, we have to investigate a new incident with Joe Biden. And of course, there's a reference to Jussie Smollett and Bubba Wallace, because Jussie Smollett claimed that he was attacked, and which, of course, he got convicted because he actually paid men to attack him. They said there were men in MAGA hats in Trump country attacking him because he's a gay star on that Empire show, but it was just two Nigerian brothers that he paid to attack him, and he walked into, I believe, the police station with a noose still on his neck, or some kind of cord or something that they said was supposed to be a noose. And then Bubba Wallace, he was frightened by a door pull. So, and they said it was somebody else discovered it, and then they had the DOJ. They had was it 11 FBI agents or something crazy like that come and investigate it, and turns out it had been there, and it's just something to pull the door down, the garage door down. It's not a noose. But of course, we were enthralled in the whole Bubba Wallace thing. And then so people refer to Bubba Wallace they reference Jussie Smollett when they're talking about him, which he didn't purposely do the hoax thing, so it's a little different. But the overreaction from the media was of course ridiculous, and then they still deserve to be mocked because ESPN did like a recent thing where they did a story on Bubba Wallace. It's supposed to be about his career and stuff, and of course I guess they would mention that, but the way that they brought it up, you know, as if to reverence the moment. And then he's like, I'll never forget the ones who didn't say something. I'm like, it was fake, dude. Nothing happened. You're holding grudges for people who wouldn't believe you or stand with you over something that wasn't real. So they still deserve to be mocked. But I just like this is a class kind of tweet. This is top tier. So thank you, Brick Suit. That's a quality tweet there. That's a quality tweet. So today I want to talk about what I believe is it's why I do what I do, and it's my greatest concern about politics and the going forward. I think it was last year about this time, if not a couple weeks before, but it was basically about this time last year. You should all recall that people were embroiled in talking about the election, and I went to election integrity meetings and rallies and talked to all these people because at first I was like, what the heck? Like I was very concerned with stuff here happening and things I was hearing. And then I was like, well, let me get some perspective. And then I talked to other people who made me feel worse. And then I talked to other people who made me feel better. And then I talked to people that just flipped me out. So I was just taking in all this information and stuff. So I was going to all these different events. And then I went to one, and it was like a dinner, and someone at my table asked me, like, what do you believe is like the greatest threat right now, or your greatest concern as far as winning elections? And I didn't really hesitate. I said, I think the greatest concern right now is the media barrier, because it was very clear to me that the media, obviously we know the media was playing games. We know the media suppressed certain information during the election. We know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris largely got to hide, though I think the debates were maybe fairer than ones we had seen in the past. There were still moments when I was like, that still seemed kind of like leaning one way or another. I guess more toward Biden than Trump, but it wasn't as bad as I guess it could have been. But it was like egregious that like they never had a foreign policy debate with a obviously we knew why, because Trump had a lot of things to brag about, and Biden was a part of administration where they expanded wars, not ended them, and that would why have a substantive debate about what the commander in chief's going to do, right? So there were lots of things that happened during the 2020 election, and even before Trump was even president, that all led to this moment of him not being in the White House right now. And a lot of times I confront people about, there's people to this day who don't like Biden. I don't know anyone who says I really love Biden. I mean, there's some delusional people out there. I'm not gonna say they don't exist, but even people who are very, very one team or something on like TikTok or something like that will still say, well, Biden isn't great, but he's better than Trump. I'm like, well, why do you think that? There's so many people who don't like Trump, but a lot of the reasons why people didn't like Trump are wrapped up in things that weren't even true. Like Russia hoax, the fine people hoax, the losers and suckers thing was debunked. If you didn't know that, I wrote an article about that on my website. If you go to Vox or something to type in like Trump's a racist, a big Vox article will pop up, and there's a lot of different things on there. Some of them don't, that if you look at it, I'm like, doesn't mean he's a racist. Like what? So, but there's things Joe Biden actually said on the campaign trail that's like, this is problematic, dude. So there's a lot of things that people heard from the media, or the media made them believe, that made them dislike Trump. but a lot of it's not even rooted in truth. Now, there's obviously personality things about Trump I can understand that you may not like. Totally get that. Totally understand that. But a lot of things people didn't like about him were things that just weren't there. So I cut this video some time ago. Well, it was during like the election. And I want to play it for you guys just to like refresh your memory about some of the informational things that happened.
Do you agree with the reporting that those records were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were resealed for a longer period of time?
The fact is that there's a lot of things that of speeches I've made, positions I've taken, interviews that I did overseas with people, and the idea that they would all be made public, and the fact while I was running for public office, they could be really taken out of context. The papers are position papers. They are documents that existed. And that when I, for example, when I met with Putin or when I met with whomever, and all of that to be fodder in a campaign.
Sir, I've got to ask you about packing the courts. And I know that you said yesterday you aren't going to answer the question until after the election. But this is the number one thing that I've been asked about from viewers in the past couple of days.
Well, you've been asked by the viewers who are probably Republicans who don't want me continuing to talk about what they're doing to the court right now.
Well, sir, don't the voters deserve to know where
they don't. I'm not going to play his game.
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
One of the folks behind Obamacare, an architect, a consultant, whatever you want to call him.
He had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in. He made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money. It would not have passed. Okay, just like the people, lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to get anything to pass.
Yeah, so I forgot I had that much stuff in there. Let's go back to Obamacare. Like, oh yeah. So there's a big information war that we have to fight. And if we don't break through this particular barrier, I don't care what sort of integrity election thing that you put in place, we're not going to win. We're not going to win. There's a reason why Democrats are so confident about trying to get rid of their electoral college, and they'll say we're not trying to get rid of their electoral college. Well, they'll go to different states, and in Michigan they're trying to do like a ballot initiative where our electoral college votes will go to whatever the popular vote is, so they don't have to get rid of the electoral college, but they can do that sort of underhandedly. And the only reason to do something like that, Democrats to push it, and this is they claim that it's like a bipartisan thing, but it is a left-wing thing. They do have some traitor Republicans a part of it, but it's not in the best interest for Republicans, I can tell you that. But the Democrats are very confident in that because they know that they have such a strong monopoly on information and entertainment and then social media that they can, if they know they can just pump out huge raw numbers, especially where they can do it in concentrated areas with highly densely populated areas where with big media markets that they can control. They're very confident that they can just keep winning and winning and winning. And maybe people feel like, well, that's just how democracy works. Well, we're not meant to be a democracy. The will of the minority is supposed to be protected. They're supposed to be considered and protected. So if you want to live in a straight up pure democracy, you can always go elsewhere. But that's not how our country is supposed to function. So if you don't like the electoral college and in that, how the House of Representatives and then the Senate works, like so many people complain about how the Senate, like it doesn't make any sense how so many people in California can want something, but Joe Manchin can block it. It's like, well, Joe Manchin is a senator. He represents a state. So but there's so many people who know these things but still push for it anyway because they're hoping that people who aren't thinking about it logically in that sort of way, or maybe are uneducated about that way, or just forgot about their education, because I'm sure you learned it in school, but maybe you're just throwing that all out the window, that they want to get their emotions riled up and just go, yeah, that's right, that's not fair. So if we don't break through this barrier, we're gonna be in a bad place. We're gonna be in a very bad place. So let's talk about it. What are the different barriers that I'm referring to? So obviously one is the mainstream media. And yes, you have Tucker Carlson kicking butt every night, right? That you have Greg Gutfeld doing his late night show and he's doing so well that he's doing better than like Fallon and Colbert and all these other guys. So he's happy and people are happy, but there's still the other networks. And then if you go out of the country or somewhere, like when my family went to Mexico for a missionary trip, they believed the wildest things. My dad said when he first went down there to Mexico in 2015, he said, if y'all thought people hated Trump up here, oh boy, they really disliked him down there. But earlier, well, I guess not earlier this year, but last year early, my sister, my dad, and some other people from my church went to Mexico, and they just believe the wildest things. I guess they just watch like CNN and whatnot down there, and they just believe that Obama was such a good Christian president, and George Floyd was a hero, and that Trump was such a bad man, and like it was, they just kept blowing their mind with fact after fact after fact. And then George Floyd was the last thing they mentioned. Like, well, we just know at least George Floyd is a hero. It's like, a hero? What? So there is such a huge monopoly of information. And then also, you do have social media who is still trying to keep these networks alive. So even though CNN may not get a lot of viewer eyeballs, like a live show, like a Don Lemon show, or maybe something like that, Tim Pool pointed out that the fact that YouTube will prop them up and give them like preference on like the first page when you type in something on YouTube and look for some kind of video, and CNN is the first, like one of the first ones to pop up with some kind of video that you're talking about, people will go click on that one. And so they're getting eyes from YouTube, and they're also getting probably a lot of revenue from YouTube as well. And then because they have those eyes on their videos, they can get a lot of ad revenue as well. And then also there's people subscribing because their content is right there on the front page. So even though you say you don't watch CNN and you don't watch Rachel Maddow and you don't watch Morning Joe, you don't watch these people, there's a lot of people that are still being directed in some kind of way, even though they may not turn on the TV, that they go on something like YouTube, which people go to every day, multiple times a day, YouTube more than like the television. And if they search for something, that's what they'll get. That's what will be fed to them. So even though their ratings aren't as good as Fox and other places, and we can laugh because CNN's, their ratings aren't as good as they used to be when who was in office, they're still getting a lot of push. Now, the traditional papers like New York Times and stuff, it's funny watching them complain about Substack, because people left New York Times, like Barry Weiss, for example, and she's not a person on the right or whatever, she's just not crazy. So she ended up leaving because her work environment was so crazy and the people there were so crazy that she left, and she started writing for Substack. And you can have free articles that people can read on Substack, but you can have people who are subscribed to your page. And then Substack like pays different money, I guess, for people coming in. And so some of these people who left these big papers and are like, well, I'm going to do my own thing, and they go to Substack or something, they're getting paid a lot more than what these traditional papers get paid for the New York Times and stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do something to some regard to kind of undercut those kind of people too, because they're really annoyed and upset with it. And it's funny when they mention it, but it's sad, first of all, that they had to leave these established, respectable papers because they were bullied or people didn't like that there was a difference of opinions that didn't just go along with the brain dead mainstream narrative all the time. And again, not people on the right, just people who aren't crazy. Glenn Greenwald, I talked about before, he started The Intercept, and he ended up leaving because it was clear his editors weren't really going to give him the leeway that he's had in the past, as you know, someone who started it, but they didn't like him commenting on Biden. They didn't like his commentary. Now, he's not someone on the right. He has a respectable distrust of government, just period. But they don't like him. Or they didn't like what he was doing because he wouldn't just fall in line with the guy that they wanted to be president. So mainstream media is definitely a problem. I want to tell this story, and I've told it before, but during the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, which is obviously a big example of like media malfeasance, my dad was in Guatemala. I think that's where he went. He went to Mexico, then he went to Guatemala not too long ago. I think it was in November. Yeah, November. While the trial was like heading to a close. And so we talked about a little bit of it, about the trial one day. And then he called me back the next day. And I had just dropped a video about shady things that are on the Rittenhouse trial. I talked about, one, the DA like thought it was a loser case, but they still had the assistant DAs went ahead along with it. That, at least that was a rumor. I talked about how they didn't execute the warrant that they got for Gage Grosskretz's phone. I talked about the relationship with the mayor, the longtime mayor, and the person investigating the case. Like there was some, I don't know, some kind of weird nepotism going on. I talked about the egregious sort of line of questioning that Binger had. I talked about how they gave evidence of a really, really small compressed file to Rittenhouse's team versus their team that they had. And they're like, well, I guess it just happened because I use iPhones and you guys use Android. And they're like, but you emailed it and it has a different file name. Like that's not how things happen. So I went through a list of things. And if you didn't read that article, I recommend you go read it. So my dad decided to read it. And he said, you know what? I didn't know that Kyle Rittenhouse didn't shoot any black people. And I was amazed because my dad is not someone who, is on the left wing of period. He's a very, very right wing person. He is not someone who's uninformed, and he definitely doesn't consume left wing media. Doesn't go out and seek out Rachel Maddow or something like that. He never, as a matter of fact, we got him a new TV for Christmas. His old TV, for some reason, I don't even know how this happened, but Fox News was like permanently burned into the TV. So you could change the channel, but it always said Fox News in the corner. It was always there. So he has a new TV. So hopefully that won't happen again. And he's very happy with it. But my point is that he's not someone who would seek out that information to be deceived. And no one purposely wants to be deceived, but there's particular, like if you're watching Joy Reid every night or something, that you're gonna be deceived, whether you may not realize you're gonna be deceived, but that's the kind of person who's telling lies every night. My dad's not watching stuff like that. Now, granted, he's busy doing missionary stuff, so whatever he's just kind of hearing and seeing, I guess, is what he's taking in, and there's probably a lot of CNN or something like that, as people were talking about it. Or maybe him scrolling on Facebook and stuff and his friends or whoever is saying stuff. He has a lot of Facebook friends. I don't know. But it shocked me that my dad did not know the facts, at least this fact, that he shot 3 white guys. There was a black guy who was attacking him. They called him Jump Kick Man. He was definitely relevant in the trial, but they didn't have him there. Another thing that was a little fishy. But it was a good thing he didn't shoot him. It was a good thing he didn't shoot him, but he shot 3 white guys. If you read some papers, it says black. And I'm not joking. I'm not joking. I've showed you guys that before. But my dad said it's scary what the media can do. My dad doesn't use terms like that, but he said it's scary what the media can do and what they can make you think. I'm of the opinion that if there was an independent media all on the ground and people taking all those cell phones and stuff like that, and Daily Caller, someone from Daily Caller was actually was there when the first man was shot and died, and he interviewed Kyle before, and there was just a lot of footage that night. And if all that wasn't there, Kyle might have been in trouble. I mean, he was already in trouble anyway. It shouldn't have been. But I mean, he could probably be in jail for the rest of his life. And the media was spinning a story, even though, and when he got off, when he was found not guilty, they kept saying, well, no one is surprised. Well, no one is surprised because the verdict is correct. Like, it shouldn't even have happened. The trial should have been just thrown out. Like, it was clearly self-defense. But then they had all these like different spins on it. Like, Joy Reid compared the criminals who attacked him, one of them being someone who's like a sexually assaulted boys who with mental problems. They were not there peacefully protesting because they're allies of Black people. That's what they want you to believe. But she actually compared those men to abolitionist John Brown. And she said the gun laws and stuff have protected white men who've always wanted to attack Black men and wanted to protect their property. And she brought it all the way back to the to the days of slavery. And then they made it seem like it was egregious crime to protect your property. So they had all these different kinds of spin surrounding his story. For what purpose? I can't read their minds, but they do want to feed this narrative that America is the most racist, awful place in the world. And then if you have an R in front of your name, if you wear a red MAGA hat, if you vote for someone who they don't like, they want to paint you like you are the responsible party of this egregious sin of racism. And that was a long, long, long sort of con that they also worked in with Trump throughout the time he was a candidate all the way into the now even still, I guess, that America is awful and Trump is particularly awful. And people who like him are awful. And America is worse because he's in office and he's emboldening all these awful people. And the only way to slay this evil, even though we'll never ever say that racism is never a problem anyway, because once we get rid of all of our problems, what else are we going to fight for? So you can't defeat it anyway, but we're going to say the way to defeat it right now is to elect this old man who's said eulogies for someone who's in the KKK. It was for segregation. Who said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. The way to save America is to vote for that guy. That's absurd. But that's what the media, that's what Joe Biden pushed, and that's what the media went along with. There's lots of different examples we could use with the media. But during the 2020 election, Joe Biden, I showed you guys that video, that cut of the video, they didn't really bother him too much on the campaign trail. And then Joe Biden also knew that even if they asked certain things, he wasn't going to answer them, and they weren't going to dig, I guess, deeper than he would allow them anyway. Like with the court packing, he said, "Sir, this is the question that everyone's asking the most." And he's like, no, it's not. It's just the people who want to know that, who are against me, who want to know that. I'm not going to answer your question because it would change the narrative. Like, you'll find out when I want you to know, basically. Now, Joe Biden knows that court packing is a bad idea. A lot of people have thought it was a boneheaded idea. He knows it's a bad idea. Now, would they be willing to do it because it's convenient? I guess, perhaps. But that's a question he did not even want to answer one way or another. And he told people why, because he didn't want to change the conversation. Now, pretty bold. I mean, obviously it's a strategy, and it was a good strategy for him. Is it immoral to just come out and tell American people, I'm not going to tell you pertinent information so you can properly make a decision on who should be the president? Yeah, he's a jerk. That is awful. And I play the Tara Reade situation. Now, a lot of people don't find Tara Reade incredibly credible. And I don't know if I do either, but her story, there's more information on her and what happened between her and Joe Biden, at least as far as cooperation, than there was in like Kavanaugh. And that was a huge story. It was a huge story. So Tara Reade claimed that that she had filed a complaint, and this complaint would be filed in this place where in the library where everything else is locked up. And so those records were supposed to become public. And since he's going back into like he's running for president, Joe Biden's like, I'm not opening up that stuff. And he literally said, there's so many, there's papers, there's opinion papers, decisions and stuff, and conversations that I had with relevant people, I guess. And I all that stuff could be cannon fodder. He literally said cannon fodder in a campaign. So he acknowledged that there was important stuff that people may want to know, things that could change people's minds. And he said that on Morning Joe to Mika and Joe, of course, but he was specifically doing the interview with Mika. And did Mika go, could you give me a specific example of things that you don't want the American people to know? No, she didn't. And did anyone really press him about that interview and the things that he said? No, they didn't. And if you were someone who's going to be hard pressed, they probably just wouldn't talk to you. They would much rather do an interview with Cardi B. Much rather do an interview with Cardi B. And we could see the media spin right now, the media push with things like COVID, how much they've driven a particular narrative. And in that video I played for you guys, we can go back further than that. Obamacare, they kept pushing the lie. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. You like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And then it came to find out that they knew certain things about the bill, that it basically is kind of like a Ponzi scheme, that healthy young people pay into it. And then older people, benefit off that money. And if it was like explained like properly to people, they wouldn't have voted for it. And they said they relied on the ignorance of the American voter. That's a heck of a bumper sticker. That's a heck of a bumper sticker. And you know what's funny about that? I'm glad I replayed this video today because I've actually gotten into a big conversation with people about this recently. Because I said that the problem with Democrats is that they rely on their voters being emotionally charged rather than factually informed. And I said, and people have pushed back against me, and they said, well, it's not like Republicans want they're emotional too. And I'm like, oh, I know they can be emotional. And in some ways, I want you guys to be emotional. I want people to be livid about like critical race theory and stuff like that. So I want you to be emotional. Don't get twisted. But I want you to be informed. I want you to be informed because if someone challenges you, I don't want you to say, well, you're a racist. Like, no, I want you to be able to critically explain and think about the positions that you hold. I want you to be passionate about them, sure. Because if you're not passionate about things, you're probably not going to fight for them too heavily. So I want you to be emotional about it, but I don't want those emotions to overtake your good thinking. But on the other hand, you can't get something like Obamacare passed unless people are not informed. Nancy Pelosi trying to pass bills. We have to pass a bill before we read it, before we know what's in it, or to find out what's in it, rather. I think that's what she said. That's obviously insane. But they'll literally say that part out loud because they know you're not going to do anything about it. That's a whole bigger issue. I think we've talked enough about the example of the media. So they push their narratives, they push their misinformation. And it's clear that they have particular sides that they pick and choose. Yes, they're a right-wing networks and stuff, there's more people on the left, and they have greater control. Now, there's a lot of right-wing places that have a lot of information. I mean, they have a lot of information. They have a lot of fans or people who are passionate who are looking at that stuff. Like Ben Shapiro is a very influential guy, right? Daily Wire is very influential. There's people who love their stuff, so they have a very engaged, clientele, I guess you could say, and people who want to support them, people who are willing to support them, and they get a lot of clicks and plays and so on. But there's social media platforms who do whatever they can to still stifle those people. I told you guys how they fact check something on something I posted, and they've done that before, and the fact checks won't even be like real fact checks. They'll be like missing context. I'm like, this has nothing to do with like the article has nothing to do with the post. How did you correlate this? You just wanted me to be marked? Because the more times I'm dinged, the more unreliable Black T News is. Because I didn't say anything untrue, sir. But their fact checks are opinions. They found that out. That's what they argued in court. So now we're moving on to social media. Now, I don't have to go long into this, but for example, the Hunter Biden situation, the laptop. Now, of course, when you first started hearing about Giuliani getting a laptop from Hunter Biden and having this content, like, it sounds like a crazy story. Granted, it sounds crazy. It's like this sounds like a conspiracy thing. It legitimately does. Like, Hunter Biden just left a laptop at a computer store and he got it, and this sounds insane. But once you just start putting together the fact that Hunter Biden is a crackhead, okay, things start to make sense. Because crackheads don't do things that make sense because they're crackheads. Okay? So they tried to label it as, say it was a misinformation campaign. Twitter wouldn't allow the New York Post, who broke the story about the contents of it, they wouldn't allow them to share the story. They blocked their account until they deleted it, but they didn't want to delete anything because they're like, we didn't do anything wrong. Now, New York Post is the oldest, I believe the oldest paper in the country. And they blocked them for a story that was true. And people could share it. And of course, Twitter is a very powerful form of information. People get their information from Twitter. A lot of times, honestly, I can just go on Twitter and start prepping for my show, look at different tweets, and see what's kind of the buzz for the news of the day. There's so much information shared on Twitter. And I know a lot of people are trying to make the move to other things because Twitter is really cracking down on people. I'm not sure that Twitter is realistically ready for a swift death. I mean, who knows? MySpace left very quickly into the night when Facebook came on the scene. But unless there's a platform that's just extraordinarily better, I don't think there's going to be enough hate to just drive everyone off the page yet. So it's still going to be a player, in my opinion, for a while. But they knew what they were doing. And they were like, well, it broke our policies because it was hacked materials. It wasn't hacked. He didn't pick up his laptop. He didn't pay for it, whatever. It ended up becoming property of the computer store person. There was a lot of weird stuff on it. So he gave it over. And that's the story. It wasn't leaked stuff. And then people try to pretend like it wasn't true when there's emails that people were confirming. Someone pointed out that Frank Lutz was emailing them, and Frank was talking about why it wasn't a big deal, the emails. And I'm like, okay, so he just confirmed that it was real. And you had people who worked with Hunter Biden who was talking about the deal between Biden and Hunter and taking the 10% for the big man, and people just wanted to ignore all that. And then eventually, oh, what's true? And not only is it true, he's lost 2 other laptops. So of course, there's a Hunter Biden thing. Social media did that. They got rid of Trump after January 6th, and the tweets that got him kicked off were really nothing burgers. I've covered that on my site before. He was like, he mentioned that, like, for example, one of them, he mentioned he wasn't going to go to the inauguration, and like, well, that could have signaled people that since Trump wasn't going to go, it was going to be safe to go there and attack. I'm like, what? You can read into whatever you want to read into, but that there's nothing in there in the tweet that suggests that. I mean, you kind of suggested that, Twitter. So maybe you should just be like poof in a puff of smoke, putting that thought in people's heads. Because Trump's tweeting didn't say that. So I'm like, Trump has had some very spicy tweets from over the years. They could have just been like auto flagging tweets from the past and been like, if you don't remove them, we're gonna get rid of you. And like, we got rid of Trump because of these 700 tweets that were very mean or something. But they took like a milquetoast tweet and was like, I'm not going to the inauguration. They're like, well, he's clearly still inciting violence because he's not going. And that's why they got rid of him. It was so bizarre. So bizarre. So these tech companies that said we want to bring people together, where people were supposed to be able to post and have conversations. There's clearly certain conversations that they don't want people to have. Even the story not too long ago, but the Facebook whistleblower that came out, it was like, well, Facebook, they're not censoring things enough. And they know that social media can harm people's self-esteem, young girls' self-esteem. They know this. It's like Zoe magazines and all these other apps and stuff. Like, you should maybe have conversations about parents maybe not giving their kids phones and stuff. Something along those lines, but her solution was, hey, you need to have the government put someone like me over Facebook. That's the solution. Just blatant taking advantage of the situation. And Facebook, push back a little bit, but at the same time, they're ready to censor themselves as well. Because there are certain people they don't want to be able to they want people to participate on their app, because obviously they want to keep still making money, but they don't want certain people to flourish on their app. So this is another big hurdle that we have to get over as well. Another big one is entertainment. Entertainment is a really big hurdle as well. And it's probably the easiest one to overcome, because the entertainment we love entertainment because it keeps us entertained, obviously, but it's not so necessary, right? But you're just addicted to like watching particular movies and films and TV shows and stuff. Now, I've gotten to the point where I don't really watch anything. I did watch Cobra Kai with my sister last night. That was the last, since then, I don't know the last time I really sat down and watched a TV show other than something I've already seen before. Like, I rewatched Fringe early last year. But I'm kind of really done with a lot of TV. And I don't have a lot of love for movies and stuff, which is unfortunate, because I'm a creative person and I like a good story. I used to watch a lot of TV, but there was just one thing after another that was just really out there that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna quit right now. But the big issue with entertainment is that so many people are so devoted to pushing certain narratives and political ideologies that they betray their own stories, they betray their own characters, and especially for like legacy sort of brands, like for example Marvel and DC, you have something that other people created, and then they come in and they capture these characters, and they get these really woke people to push their ideas through them. It's really, really bizarre. It's really bizarre. And I've talked about this on the show before. I've done videos on it as well. If you want to go to blacktnews.com, look on the backlogs with the videos and see Jordan Peterson, how Marvel Comics had an issue with Red Skull, and Red Skull was talking about like his 10 rules for chaos or 12 rules for chaos or whatever. Obviously, it was a dig at Jordan Peterson. And they talked about him, and they talked about the kind of people he recruits. And Jordan Peterson laughed it off. They sold some like Hale Lobster merch and stuff, so they got a kick out of it eventually, and they made money for charity. But I thought it was particularly offensive. I'm like, this man is a doctor. He helps people. He helps people who get their lives in order. He's had so many letters from young men who were so radical, whether it's right or left and whatnot, and they just were like, you know what? The solution is within me. Let me clean up my room. Let me get my life in order. Let me look at the deepest, darkest parts of myself and try to set myself on the correct path, on a good path, toward moral and virtue. And they want to compare these people to Nazis, not just Nazis, but like special super Nazis, basically. And the person who wrote the story is Ta-Nehisi Coates. And Ta-Nehisi Coates has a very nihilistic view of the country. He wrote once that he saw like the World Trade, the towers falling and in 9/11 and didn't feel anything, didn't think anything. You know, he was asked, I believe, by like Colbert, like, are you gonna ever like be optimistic like about the country or something like that? And he's like, no, like there's no reason. And that doesn't mean that he can't write good things, but obviously when you make something like that, or when you hire a lot of people like him, or a lot of people who are super, super woke to push different agendas, rather than really having respect for these characters and where they've come from, that's a problem. It's a problem. Like they try to say like Superman has a son, Jonathan Kent. He came out as gay, and his boyfriend is a pink-haired hacktivist, and they protest against like they protest in favor, trying to help like refugees, and they protest against climate change. And so it's so hit the nail on the head, it's so obvious what they're doing with it. And then when people come out and write the stories and they're like, well, I felt, this is a real problem right here, what I'm about to tell you. They say, well, I felt if it was another straight white man, there would have been a missed opportunity. I'm like, you guys are racist. It's a problem if someone is just a white man. Like, you don't even understand what makes Superman a great character. You don't even understand what makes men great. So you take all your ideas, because you don't understand who you are. You take what you think is important to you and your pronouns and whatnot, and you inject it everywhere. Because you need to feel validation through someone else's work. And it's not just that either. There's people who really pushed racial stuff in the past few years. I have a clip, and I've played this before on Cartoon Network of telling people not to see color.
Colorblindness is our game because everyone's the same. Everybody join our circle. Doesn't matter if you're white or black or purple. What the? Whoa. Hold up a minute here. Ugh, who wrote this? I think it kind of does matter that I'm purple. I mean, I'm purple because I'm literally an alien.
Well, I'm not an alien, but it definitely matters to me that I'm black.
Yeah, it makes a difference that I'm white. I know the two of us get treated very differently.
I just think it's messed up to compare me being an alien to you two being different races. You're both human. You're totally biologically the same. Adding purple people into a lesson about human racism makes no sense.
Yeah, that is pretty weird. I think people like the black, white, or purple thing because adding a fantasy race in there helps distract from the actual racism black people have to deal with.
Right. My experience with anti-black racism is really specific. Other people of color experience other forms of racism too, but you won't see any of that if you don't see color.
Yeah, so this anti-racism thing is something by Ibram Kendi. and it's kind of like an offshoot of critical race theory. He's not one of like the people who made critical race theory, but it is an offshoot of it. And then critical race theory is meant to kind of grow into these different sects as well. So there's some people who think Ibram Kendi's stuff is a little crazy, and they try to like separate them. And there's plenty enough crazy stuff in the original writings of critical race theory. But Ibram Kendi is a pretty interesting guy, and so they say that even just not being racist isn't enough. You have to actively be an anti-racist. And so the thing about critical race theory, they want the world in some regard to continuously be more divisive, because they really don't want you to have a colorblind society. Now, I obviously can't, if you guys see me, and obviously you know I'm a Black person, and if I see you, I might notice that you are a white person, Hispanic person, whatever, but they don't believe in having neutral laws. They think that too much has happened, that we can't just up and decide like, you know what, let's just treat everyone the same. Like, they don't believe that is within us. They don't believe that's within us. And maybe it's not in a part of a lot of people, but there's a lot of older people who say like, you know what, racism wouldn't be a problem if we just kind of stopped talking about it, kind of stopped obsessing about it. But there's too many people who profit too much off of it to try to have a world in which everyone is acknowledged as equals. That would mess up a lot of people's money. And then there's a lot of people who are against racism, but they really push it themselves. For example, Michael Eric Dyson. I've played several clips for you guys where he's like talking about David Cameron, who's the Attorney General, is Daniel Cameron, and then Kanye West. He talked about the new AG in Virginia, Winsome Sears. No, I'm sorry, she's a lieutenant governor. Winsome Sears and Clarence Thomas. So he'll say that they are white supremacy by ventriloquism. Like, there is a black mouth moving, but white ideas are coming out. Now, why can't it? First of all, it's interesting that you think anyone could control Kanye West like that, but but if you think differently, how come he's not the one who's having white supremacist ideas? He's the one saying that you have to think a certain way. You can't just allow people to think how they want to think, but if they don't align with you, it's some kind of white supremacy propaganda. And he said worse than that about Clarence Thomas. Like, just absolutely disgusting things. But he's the person that Chris Harrison, who did The Bachelor, once he got like in the hot scene, got canceled, before he got totally fired, he was going through, I don't know, it seemed like a corrective mental surgery, I guess you could say. And he was being counseled. And he said one of the people who were counseling him was Dyson. Dyson was in a debate with Jordan Peterson, and they weren't even talking about racism and stuff. They were talking about like political correctness and stuff. And then he ended up calling Jordan Peterson a mean, mad white man because it was white privilege. Like, it was totally uncalled for to be that rude to Jordan Peterson. He's like, why are you so mad? Everything's so good for Jordan Peterson, best-selling author, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, just because he survived people's vicious attacks doesn't mean that he hasn't been attacked. They try to act like if you're not canceled, no one tried to cancel you, which is absurd. So entertainment, especially like in last year, you guys probably noticed that there were so many. Well, I guess that wasn't last year, in 2020. In 2020, after George Floyd, there were so many different TV shows that had BLMs kind of stuff. And every like live action show was touching on it. So it was really annoying anyway. Because I'm like, if one of you just decided to not do that, you'd be like original. but none of you want to be original. And SWAT, the TV show, they had some powerful propaganda. Powerful. It was well done. Powerful. It was crap, but it was powerful. Very effective, I would think. Very effective. But all of them were marching to a particular drum with that. They're marching to a particular drum with COVID, which I thought was interesting because I'm like, this is, if you guys are that concerned about COVID, you could not shoot TV shows. Now, of course, there's people who work on TV shows who aren't as well off as like the actors and whatnot, and you don't want them to not have a job. And everybody's job is essential to people who need the money to take care of their families. But if you're going to talk about things that are actually important to people, as far as like essential businesses, since that's something that the government was throwing around, I wouldn't say Blue Bloods and TV shows like that were it. So and same with sports too. If you guys are that concerned about COVID, you could just not play right now. I know that would interrupt too many people's money though, so they're not going to do that. But if you want to talk about, if you're really that concerned about it, you can shut it down. It's not that important to really be risking people's lives like that. Now we got to get back to society. So I've always been anti-lockdown, but I know they're very push the lockdowns. So it's very interesting what people think is really important in what they will do for the convenience of themselves. So entertainment's been really bad. I've talked about like on Blue's Clues, they had a lot of, they had like the Alphabet Mafia kind of stuff. We've talked about Disney and different things in the past. Entertainment's really bad. Education is also terrible as well. A few weeks ago, we talked about how there were 2 teachers who convinced a 12-year-old girl that she was a boy, and they changed the medical records of the child without the parents' consent. They got some stuff, they left some stuff out that was important in her medical records, by the way, and they called the parents to the school, and when they did not react the way that they wanted them to react, they called CPS on them. And then the parents ended up saying their child is suicidal. And not only did these parents do that to these 2 kids, they apparently went to a conference in California and instructed other teachers how they can do, I guess, the same thing and recruit kids into these particular LGBT clubs. And then they're not official clubs, so you don't have to have anyone sign in. So if a parent says, hey, is my kid in this club? They can play dumb and be like, oh, I don't know about that. And they teach people how to specifically do these things in conservative areas. So that's pretty bad. And then you got critical race theory. We've talked about critical race theory a lot on the show. And they try to say it's not in schools. Obviously, it is in schools. They'll and some of them same people who say it's not in schools will come around and say, like Kimberly Crenshaw, she's one of the people who like founded it. She'll admit and go to these conferences where they will say that they teach critical race theory insights. So no one is going to do an in-depth sort of step-by-step process at, middle school, but they will certainly teach particular principles about it. And they know that. And as a matter of fact, in Detroit, you had the superintendent who said that we incorporate it in the social studies and we're to incorporate in other areas as well. There are some people who just actively or openly are admitting that they embrace it. So people are saying it's not in schools. They try to say it's not in schools, but then they'll fight people who try to keep it out of schools. That is crazy. That is crazy. And we just thought like other sort of like left-wing indoctrination was bad. Like your innocent little child going to college and then coming back with a shaved purple buzz haircut and he, her, they / them in the pronoun. I don't know, like with a bunch of crazy feminist ideas. Like that's what people used to be concerned about, I think, in like 2015. And now people are about what might happen to your kid when they go to college and then all of a sudden they want to be a socialist or something. And now it's, oh my gosh, your 12-year-old girl had their medical records changed. And there's educators, I talked about that online on TikTok. There's teachers who are livid about that. So not all teachers are bad. I'm not trying to say that. But there's definitely some wackadoodles who do not respect your parental bound. They don't respect the line. They don't respect the line. So education there's things to worry about in that regard too. And these are all sort of monopolies that the left wing, especially when you get to college level, are really, really have their hands in. That if Republicans don't break through some of these barriers, you're just going to lose. We've already lost a lot of generations, but it keeps getting progressively worse, but it's really bad right now. It is really, really bad right now. And then you got parents who will show up at school board meetings, and then the school board will write a letter to the working in coordination with the White House, mind you, in order to get the DOJ to write a letter and start tagging parents, as domestic terrorists. And we've covered that on the show as well. And then you got someone like Merrick Garland, who was supposed to be so such a straight shooter, right down the middle. This is a person they wanted on the Supreme Court, and he played along with this nonsense. And then there's also corporate America. Corporate America has played along as well. Do you guys, a really obvious example, do you guys remember when Coca-Cola did the try to be less white? So this is like taken from Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, which just exploded after George Floyd died. Everybody was talking about white fragility. People were reading it. I knew people who read it, like, and not in an ironic, funny, mock it kind of way. People who were like taking it seriously. 2020 was such an annoying year for a lot of reasons, but people just lost their minds, and I just couldn't deal with the world, just how crazy people were. White and black people were just so crazy, lost their darn minds. And I've covered this on the show, but they say to be less white is to be less oppressive, be less arrogant, be less certain, be less defensive, be less ignorant, be more humble, listen, believe, break with apathy, break with white solidarity. Now, the crazy thing about this, of course, is that other groups can be all these things as well. These are not particularly white traits. Listen, believe. Why should you can't listen and believe to everybody? You can listen. Not everybody's out there telling you the truth. Even if their skin color is a little darker than yours, people aren't always telling you the truth. They absolutely are not. Some people exaggerate. Some people don't see the situation in the right way. It's just kind of skewed for their feelings. They're not objective, which critical race theory supports people being subjective and not objective. But there's people who will flat out lie to you. Confronting racism means understanding what it means to be white and challenging what it means to be racist. In the US and other Western nations, white people are socialized to feel that they are inherently superior because they are white. Research shows that by the age 3 to 4, children understand that it is better to be white. That is crazy. My nephew really, really likes Into the Spider-Verse. And when did that movie come out? He's 6 now. But he's been watching it for a long time, and he didn't understand. It took him a while to even understand the concept of white and black. It took him a long time for he to even understand that. And when he would talk about black, he was talking about like Spider-Man, like Miles' black costume. Like he didn't even understand race that deep. And when he saw Coco, he thought everyone was white because under our skin, our bones are white. So don't tell me you think kids 3 to 4 to understand it's better to be white. That is crazy. But that's the kind of stuff that Robin DiAngelo pushed and that different corporations started pushing because they all wanted, I don't know, they felt like they needed some kind of racial incorporated training, but why attach yourself to that wackadoodle? And Coca-Cola wasn't the only one. Chris Rufo, who's done a lot of work exposing critical race theory in different schools and also corporate America as well. He has a lot of different examples, but I know family members and friends who work in certain companies, and they send out crazy sort of texts and crazy sort of tweets that are, and they've had different trainings that say things that are pretty much like that you have to affirm, that you have to believe, that you have to break with white solidarity. So we have a huge problem in corporate America as well. And we saw, and there's different political opinions that you might have that big corporations will want to pull out of. Like we saw that back with the gender bathroom debate, where people wanted to pull out. Was that what state was that? Where there was they didn't want to do a gender. There was a city ordinance in Charlotte. I guess maybe was it North Carolina then? Because Charlotte had like a city ordinance that they were trying to pass, but then you could go to the bathroom at if you were any gender or whatever, go wherever you want. And then the state was like, no, you can't do that. And the people were mad at the state. And then people were going to start boycotting the state. And it's like, if everyone, like, I remember when we didn't have these discussions, like as some kind of big argument about where to go to the bathroom. Like if you were a convincing trans person, you probably went wherever you wanted to go, or you just tried not to use bathroom in public if you weren't so, or if you tried to just do it alone. But I don't remember all these conversations, people being obsessed about where people were peeing. Now, I do believe that your woman should be peeing in the woman's bathroom, but I just remember a time when this wasn't a public debate like this. And then someone decided to make it a debate, and then someone else responded, and then all these companies were like, well, we're boycotting your state. Isn't that crazy? Or let's look at the recent example was when you had people pull up the All-Star game, and people were mad about the different laws in Georgia where they were trying to just shore up election laws. They weren't making it harder to vote, but that was the different sort of talking points that they had. And then people just was like, well, we're going to pull out business. And then people start, changing tone a little bit after people were like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose a lot of money. And the politicians started to say like, well, I didn't say like pull out, or it's like, no, you did. Stacey Abrams is running for governor again, but I hope people remember how she cost their state money and caused a big ruckus over that. You have more people voting than ever before, and people are trying to say that people are trying to suppress the vote. I personally believe that people should have voting day. And I've said this before, I'll keep saying it. I don't like all the early voting stuff, so y'all already get a lot. But they're like, oh, it's racist because you can't pass out food and water in the line? I'm like, I don't get no food and water when I go vote. And you can do that. You just can't do that within a certain distance of the voting space, which isn't new. There's certain things that people can't give you. And I guess some of y'all be wilding out in other states, like trying to give out all kinds of like goodies to bribe people to vote a particular way. We don't got no goodies in Michigan. Nothing. We also don't have early voting like other people do. No, everybody had like the mail-in ballot thing that we had going on, and people would go, turn those in at clerk offices and stuff. But people started to have a misconception about early voting. We didn't have early voting like in other states do. But I mean, people had any reason absentee, but it's not really the same thing. So anyway, those are all the sort of issues that we have going on with the media barrier. You got mainstream media, you got entertainment, education, you got in corporate America. They're all sort of going the way, the narrative of the left. So what can we do as far as solutions to sort of bring this back? Well, first things first, you have to support independent media. You have to support independent media that can rise up and reach a different kind of market, can maybe present information a different kind of way that will make people think. And I already mentioned how I believe independent media on the ground at Kenosha probably saved Kyle Rittenhouse from having to spend a life in prison. A Daily Caller was there on the ground. There was another journalist who got in an Uber and just drove so he could cover stuff on the ground. He testified at the trial. There was just a lot of stuff, not just people's phones, but there was like a amateur photographer who took a lot of photos. One of them, I guess, is pretty famous now, called Kyle Clean Up Graffiti. So if people weren't there on the ground doing those sort of things, he would have been in a lot of trouble. And Daily Wire, they were able to impact the Virginia race, because they had an independent investigator who exposed the school trying to cover up a girl who was raped in the bathroom, or was sexually assaulted in the bathroom, and they lied about sexual assaults happening in the school to cover for their bathroom gender policy. And I guess they'll still claim that they weren't covering it up, but they definitely weren't honest about it. And the father who flipped out at the meeting, he was listed in the letter that the school board is in a reference to why, hey, can you consider using the Patriot Act against these parents and stuff? This concerned dad, that incident made it in the reference for that letter. And he was just trying to protect his daughter. So Daily Wire, they covered that story. It got a lot of different traction. And it really, I believe, really made a difference in the Virginia race as far as getting people engaged, parents engaged. And there are other parents engaged anyway. But I think it really made a big difference. So you need to support independent media. And some of them start really from the ground up, obviously. You're on the ground floor pretty much with Black Tea. I'm thankful for all the growth that we had in the past year or so. But you have to consider supporting independent media when you can, because they're the voices who are fighting back against a lot of this stuff and not marching to the beat of the mainstream media's drum. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing, you have to break through your fears. I know a lot of you don't want to talk to your friends and neighbors and so on. 62% of Americans do not want to talk politics with people. They don't want to voice their opinion because they're too afraid. They're too afraid. I have so many people come up to me and say, well, I can't say that, what you say. I can't do what you do. Or they say, I can't say that because I'm white and they'll call me racist. I'm like, well, they call me an Uncle Tom. They call me a coon. They say, and I'll keep taking the brunt of those arrows, but I really do need more people. There's so many people who are just thinking logically, who have common sense, who are just terrified to say something. But if you don't stand up and say something, people do use the popular opinion of people to change other people's opinions. For example, the founders of NARAL admitted, Bernard Nathanson, and he ended up having a conversion to Catholicism. So then he came back and confessed to all the awful things that he did when he co-founded NARAL. But one of the things that they did was they lied about how much public support there was for abortion. So they knew I think it was only like 5% or something, but they said it was like 85% or something like that. They totally flipped it. Or said it was like, I guess there's like missing numbers there. Well, I guess maybe the other part was like undecided or something. But they made it seem like it was, such a strong show of support for abortion. And then they also lied about the amount of women who are harmed in illegal abortion, because they were trying to convince the feminists they needed the women on board, because it was really being pushed by men who were like pro-eugenics and stuff. So they needed feminists to believe that it was empowering and that people needed abortion restrictions removed. So people can use the power of polling. People still use it today. Then they're like, well, all these women or all these men and Americans believe that abortion is wrong. Well, like, what stage? Let's break it down. At what stage? Because not everybody is for it up to third trimester. Not everybody wants it to second trimester. Majority of abortions happen before like week 15. But where do you stand? Like, do you think it should be banned after 6 weeks? Like 10 weeks? Like, not everyone feels the same. Not everyone feels the same. And some people just don't care and don't want to be in the fight. So they're just like, well, I'm pro-choice because it won't happen to my kid, but I don't really care. So I wouldn't say that's the same as people just being for it. And even people who say that they're for it say that they're not even really for it. Now, there are crazy people who are just like, screw them kids, I guess. But they manipulate polling, they manipulate data, they manipulate questions, even sometimes how they're even asked. But they do that because they know that they can shape public opinion by what people believe is public opinion. So if there's just so many people out there who do have a lot of common sense and are willing to stand up to the machine, and other people see other people who are willing to stand up to the machine, we can fight back some of this craziness, but not if you're too afraid to come forth and speak and fight for what you believe in. And if you're not even brave enough to just even speak up and say, hey, I don't think that's right. Like, I'm not, you don't know to say you can go to a march. I'm not asking you to run for office. But if you won't at least just stand up and say, hey, that's wrong. And I believe that men are men and women are women. If people are even too afraid to just say that, people will say, I've seen videos where someone will ask, like, how many genders are there? Like, do you believe there's more than 2 genders? They say, yeah, well, how many are there? And they don't have answers. And when you really start trying to ask questions, it seems like I don't know, like they just don't want to hurt people's feelings, but some things are objectively true and some things are objectively false. And if we won't even stand up for objective truths anymore, what are we going to do in America? We won't have one for very long. You won't have one for very long. So I want you to at least be brave enough to push past your fear and stand up for what you believe in. And you don't have to be the most, I'm not saying you got to get a TikTok and make a bunch of videos. At least when opportunity arises, just let people know what you think. At least that's something. Another thing is I want you to, once you get to that stage, I want you to talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to your church members, talk to your family about these issues, especially as you begin to continue to get educated on them. And you could just drop a couple different facts. I have a friend who I've had on my TikTok show. Her TikTok page is Party of Logic. So she's a recovering Democrat, she says. And so she realized that something was wrong with her line of thinking, because she was talking about guns and she used the term assault weapon. And someone asked her, like, what do you even mean by that? She realized she didn't know. She always considered herself to be, and she's a smart woman. And she's always considered herself to be a smart, independent woman. But she could not even explain the term she was using. She had a strong political opinion for no reason other than feelings and regurgitating lines and information she had heard from other people. So at that point in time, there are other things, but she said that was like her wake-up call. She's like, oh my gosh, I use this term, and people use these terms passionately, and they have no idea what they're talking about. So at least she could wake up to that. But maybe your friend, your neighbor, someone is just waiting for someone to just challenge them and ask them just a question. Now, please don't be rude. Please don't be mean. And maybe they'll end up being nasty to you to whatever, but just like, you could just be kind and gently, just challenge people a bit. And if you got to be like a little mind ninja from time to time to plant question here and there, and maybe they'll get curious and ask you a little bit. From time to time, you guys can have more in-depth conversations. You don't have to be like, burn the barn down, to have the conversation. You can do it gently, you can ease into it, but you have to have those conversations. And you cannot wait until like a month before an election, because that's when people are like on overdrive, guns a-blazing. You have to establish those relationships and build them over time, especially if you want to change people's minds, especially before people get really, really oversaturated. Now we're going into the election year. Please don't wait until it's like the very end of it. Basically from now on, we're just going to be like just running straight forward with the election anyway. But your entire world's not going to be caught up entirely with the election, and people you know is not going to be entirely caught up with the election. At least we're not right now. But you can just bring up certain things here and there. See how they respond. And if they say something that's like seems a little weird, you could just ask a question like that. Hey, do you know? I'm not trying to be rude, but do you know what do you mean by that? Like assault weapon. What do you mean by that? And go from there. Just plant the seeds and have those conversations. We need to have them. Maybe there's a very, very logical thinker in there, but you have to press them a little bit. And you can't be afraid to do that. Another thing you have to do is start considering how you're going to shift your money. I mentioned entertainment. Young Ripa, Eric July, he has a podcast called For Canon's Sake. He has a rule that I think is pretty good. He said never spend more than 50% of your money on people who hate you. I'm not saying go out and boycott everything, but you should consider shifting your money. Now, there's a lot of companies that are super woke or going woke or entertaining the woke. And if you just cut everything woke out of your life right now, you probably won't be able to drive, to buy anything, food and shelter. Like it'll just be bad. So maybe you have to pick your battles sometimes, but one that's really easy is entertainment. That's one that's pretty easy. I won't get into it big today, but people know that I haven't really been watching Marvel stuff for a while. And I hope they get their act together, but they purposely inject politics and they resent their customer. And so I don't really want to keep subsidizing that way. And I'm just a little small fish in a pond, and Disney's a huge evil conglomerate. But I think you should at least consider Eric July's rule about not spending more than 50% of your money on people who hate you. And just look at other options. Or maybe just cut out some stuff and be a little more productive in life. Like you find a lot more productive stuff if you don't watch Marvel stuff all the time. Another thing people can do is build their own stuff. Build your own alternatives. Entertainment. Again, it's very easy. Find other people who write things, support them. You go and make your own stories. Go make your own superheroes now that people can love and look up to. Because a lot of these, Eric July says DC stands for dead company, man. And they make so many crazy decisions nowadays. I'm like, I agree. And I'm like, am I going to have to give up Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman because of this crazy company? He's actually making his own comic books. Now, they may be terrible. I don't know. But I will give them a read when they come out. I haven't read a comic book in a long time. But we love the format. We love growing up with them. They were a huge part of my life growing up. But if someone's willing to rise to the occasion with something different and they're not going to hate their fan base, I think it's worth giving them a shot. So you can find other alternatives and try to support them. There's a religious company that's coming out with, they're working with Sunrise Entertainment. It's like a animation studio in Africa. They're doing a movie, an animated movie about David from the Bible. From what I saw, it looks really good. They're going to have their own music, and it's going to be like a Disney film, kind of, but not Disney. And it looks good so far from what I've seen, but people need to start making their own stuff. And when you see stuff like that, you can go out and support it. Now, I know sometimes there's stuff that don't look too hot. So when you can find something legitimately good, go ahead and support it. But I agree that you probably shouldn't spend more than 50% of your money on people who hate you. And you should try to find ways to support people who have similar values to you. And I don't always want to have to think about the balance of good and evil and stuff when you just want to sit down and watch TV. But they fund a lot of terrible things. And they hate you. And they resent you. They resent their customer base. So I would just think about it. Again, especially since these are things in areas of your life where they are not so essential, like entertainment. People should also consider supporting different platforms as well. And I think if you're really spitting out some facts and stuff, you're going to be kicked off on stuff very quickly. So I'm going to start expanding on other places. I'm definitely going to start expanding on other places. But some people need to build platforms. And I hope there's people out there. I know Trump was announced something. I don't know how steady moving he is on with his platform, his own social media he announced. But there are people out there who I think need to build other sort of entertainment. I would watch something that's like wholesome. A lot of people's out of pocket with some of the stuff that they make. Also get involved, politics, local politics. There was a woman out on the west side of the state. She didn't have a lot of experience doing anything, but she just wanted to make some change. She started getting with some people and got some other folks elected, just being kind of like their campaign manager, and like flipped a small area. Just a determined woman, a determined mom. So get out there and do something for school board, or whether you're going to run for something, support somebody who runs for something. Another big thing with education, some of y'all going to have to just pull your kids out and homeschool. There's so many people who decided to take that option. You cannot be surprised when you keep sending your kids off to these really, really left-wing people and they come home with some twisted ideas. Now, some people feel like their kids have to go to school, especially like Christians, like, well, that's where they're supposed to evangelize. And that's a huge conversation for another day, I guess. There's a lot of feelings surrounding it, but at the same time, it's like, it's almost like the Hunger Games where you send your kids into the Hunger Games. It's like, you go evangelize to the people in the Capitol. Like, let your kids be kids. Your job is to protect them. This is a huge conversation we'll have to have for another day. I understand that. I understand the argument of like your kids need to go there or whatever. My dad evangelized a lot in school, high school, but I will never have my kids in public school. And I like my public school. I just don't feel it's the same like it was when I was a kid. There's so many people who just really want to indoctrinate your kids there. Another thing, you have to encourage community over government. There's so many people who are like, I just want to be left alone. And I want you to be able to be left alone. But there's a lot of people out there who do want to have some kind of sense of community, who really believe in the government because they need that option or feel that they need that option to take care of them. And people should be taking care of themselves. But sometimes people do need help. And a lot of conservative people are very charitable, like people on the left who want to argue against pro-lifers. They say, well, you don't care about the baby after it's born. That's just patently false. It's patently false. So many pro-life organizations get diapers. They help women. I've seen people pay women just to get sonograms to not kill their baby that day. They do all kinds of things to help a life, to help the woman along. So it's just really not true, but they just need that talking point. But if people could know, and maybe it's an education thing that we need to do, just encourage people that you can rely on community, you can rely on charity. There are people out there who want to help you. Like a big problem, I think, with people who are going to want to pull their kids from school, they're always going to need like homes, like public education, because there's people who are going to say that they can't do that. Well, maybe we can help people who want to be able to do that. Maybe we need to come together and put our heads together on how we can continue to help those people. Now, of course, there's options for like school choice where the money follows the kids. But that's also like just redirecting government funds anyway. Maybe there needs to be some kind of course, there's charter schools and stuff for like private sector sort of solutions, but maybe there's something more that we can do to let people know that they can have the power to help their kids. And I was kind of brainstorming with people at church the other day about something that maybe we could do like in the future. But people need to know that there is a helping hand out there, and conservatives aren't just like, get off my lawn and you go buy your own lawn and take care of yourself. And if you end up a hobo in the street, that's your problem. People should not just have that opinion of that is what conservatism is. They need to know that there is a community that is willing to help them and be charitable as well, and to not give them the handout, but the hand up. And again, I think that's a communication error that maybe we have, that we don't come off as well to people. But we need to definitely encourage community rather than people feeling that they need to rely on the government. So those are a couple different suggestions on how to break through what I think is the biggest problem, and that's the media barrier. And none of the things I said are easy solutions for things that are going to happen overnight. And we've gotten to a mess in our country, and it was something that was not a short-term thing that happened. People have been slowly turning our a friend of mine wore a shirt not too long ago at an event that said maybe it was like about a year ago at least, that we didn't lose the cold, that we never won the Cold War. You know, people just found a different way to fight it, and especially like in our education systems and in other areas as well. But we've had this slow turn in America, and a lot of people, they just blinked, and to them, they woke up and they didn't recognize their country. But this is something that's been going on a long time. Like, people have been talking about critical race theory a lot recently, but it is not new. It's not new, but a lot of people have been crusading against it as of late. They're making a lot of big noise about it. And then there are so many people who bought stuff like white fragility, I think, that people are like, this stuff is stupid. Like, there's too many people who maybe started, their star rose a little too high, and now there's proper retaliation, I guess, to it. But again, this is something that's been going on for a long time. So this has been a really long race for the left. And I don't have a big, fast solution turnaround. The only kind of solution I have is kind of more like a spiritual one. But as a minister, I guess that's how I can stay encouraged. But to someone else will say, y'all just need Jesus, I guess. And I believe that if people's hearts and minds turn, then maybe we could see a lot of these things kind of happen faster. But in the meantime, it's going to take time, and it's going to take work. And if you want to take back your country, it's not going to be something that happens overnight. And it's definitely not something that you can just take back with one election. Or even if Trump had been like reelected or something, it's not something that's just going to happen because of one person, because you put your faith in one person. And a lot of it really has to do with you. Like, so many people were like, oh, I'll go to the polls and I'll hit the check mark for Trump and I'll be just part of the silent majority. We can't afford for you to be silent anymore. And I don't mean that I need you to go out the side of the road and start waving a Trump flag. I mean, I need you to talk to your friends and your neighbors and to question them about some of their decisions and policies, and just think it through. And if they believe the way that they believe and they are settled in their ways, and they could be very informed, but they're just on the left. And if that is the case, that is the case. But I'll say this again before I close, and I know we had a long show today. There's so many people who hated Trump, for example, over things that were lies, over things that weren't even true. The Russia collusion hoax, and that was something the media pushed nonstop. No merit in it. All fizzed out. The Losers and Hoax story was a very good last hit piece on Trump. That was debunked. I debunked it. I mean, other people debunked it and denied it. But if you go to blacktnews.com, I have the information of the debunk. That's pretty thorough, because they said that the reason why Trump didn't go in France to a cemetery to honor troops is because he said they were losers and suckers. So that was what the Atlantic said. No, it was the weather, and they were concerned about how he'd get out. And there's military documents and stuff that corroborate that as well. People in Trump's circle denied it. Bolton, who has no love for Trump now, was like, if he had said that, I would have wrote an entire book about it. So everything that they hinged on wasn't true. And then they said, well, people said that it happened, but they don't have independent sources. They just keep going to sort of the same source, and like CNN might say, well, this person said it was true, and then Fox said that this person said it was true, but they don't have different sources that are all kind of saying that it happened. So they have really shady ways of claiming that something is true. So there was that. There was the hoax, the fine people hoax, Trump saying that neo-Nazis were very fine people, even though in the exact same transcript he says, I'm not talking about neo-Nazis, I condemn them totally. And there are people who believe that Trump never condemned white supremacy. Even to this day, you could do a man on the street video and people like, well, he never condemned white supremacy. And he's did it so many times. The Russia bounty story was fake. And Biden pushed that. And then Jen Psaki was asked, like, are they going to apologize for their role in pushing this? No. Like, well, he just cared about the troops. You didn't care about people's confidence in the commander in chief. Like, I know you're in an election, but there are some things that should be sacred. Like, people are mad about the Joe Biden thing. The people are mad about the Let's Go Brandon and the dad who said that during the Christmas thing. And like, oh, you're not respecting the office. Joe Biden didn't respect the office. Joe Biden didn't respect the office of Trump being in the president. You can not like someone and you can criticize their job, but they did everything they could to undermine the relationship of the commander in chief, even with the people he was over. They did everything to make this man totally unreliable. Like when the story broke about, well, when people started accepting that the lab leak theory could be possibly true, they're like, oh, well, Trump mentioned it, but he has no credibility. Why doesn't he have any credibility? Could it be because you keep telling people that Trump told people to drink bleach? Could it be that CNN did a story about, is Trump afraid of stairs? Could it be that people were saying that Trump was peeing on Russian prostitutes? Maybe that's why he doesn't have any credibility. Because you undermined it at every turn, not because he's actually not credible. So we have a lot of work to do. Again, these are not overnight things, but there are things I think we can work together. And I believe that's why you're here, Black T News, like watching the lives and reading articles and so on and having the conversation here. But I am optimistic that we can turn things around by getting involved, making our own sort of content, supporting each other, redirecting your funds, educating your kids. And if they do have to go to public school, at least watch them. Get involved and make sure that you know what your kids are being taught, that you know the teachers, that you're having conversations with, and that people respect the healthy line between they are an educator, but you are the parent. They should not be teaching your kid anything inappropriate. So we got a lot of work to do, but we can do it. I hope I didn't freak you guys out too much today. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you want to support blacktnews.com, like I said, supporting independent media is extraordinarily important. Please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com. Please check out different merchandise that we have on the store. As I said, you guys can support different independent media. I do in different kind of content. I do write historical fiction fantasy books, chapter books, contemporary fantasy, all kinds of different stuff that you guys can check out at blacktnews.com. And I will see you guys tomorrow. And happy